original narrative, especially created for Love Behind Gold. Eliza Bennett traced her fingertips along the cold marble countertop of their shared kitchen, freezing when she heard Alexander's footsteps approaching. 3 years of marriage, yet she still held her breath whenever he entered a room. The most painful part wasn't the separate wings of their mansion, nor the carefully scheduled routines to avoid accidental meetings. It was knowing he could hear her crying at night and did nothing. She quickly wiped away an escaped tear as his tall figure appeared in the doorway, his steel-gray eyes meeting hers for the briefest moment before sliding away. The contract they'd signed lay invisible between them, thicker than any wall, a business arrangement masquerading as marriage, a cage gilded with wealth that trapped them both in separate corners of the same exquisite prison. The most painful part of sleeping in separate wings of the same mansion wasn't the distance. It was knowing he could hear her crying at night and did nothing about it. Eliza Bennett stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering when exactly she'd become this hollow-eyed stranger. At 32, she should be in her prime, not withering away in a marriage that existed only on paper. 3 years ago, she'd been a rising star in architecture, her modernist designs catching attention across the industry. Then her father's firm collapsed under debt, threatening not just their livelihood, but the Bennett legacy spanning 4 generations. Alexander Blackwood's proposal had appeared like salvation, marriage in exchange for saving her family's name and business. A simple transaction. Business partners in public, strangers in private, he'd said, his voice as cold as his handshake when they signed the prenuptial agreement. I need a respectable wife for appearances. You need financial security. Emotions complicate things unnecessarily. Eliza remembered nodding, believing she could handle any arrangement to protect her family. What she hadn't anticipated was the crushing loneliness of living with someone who looked through her rather than at her. Their rules were simple: separate bedrooms, minimal interaction, attendance at key social events together, and absolute discretion. Alexander had built his technology empire through ruthless precision, and he approached their marriage with the same clinical efficiency. She stepped out of her bathroom into her private suite, a beautiful prison of cream and gold. The east wing belonged entirely to her, just as the west wing was Alexander's domain. The central areas of the mansion, kitchen, dining room, main living spaces, were neutral territory, carefully navigated through unspoken schedules to avoid unnecessary encounters. Eliza glanced at her watch, 6:30 a.m. Alexander would be in his home gym until 7:15, then shower before leaving for the office by 8 o'clock. Her window to use the kitchen without interruption was clear. Downstairs, she prepared coffee and toast, eating quickly at the Marble Island. The house staff wouldn't arrive until 9 o'clock. Alexander preferred privacy in the mornings. As she rinsed her cup, she caught her reflection in the window, pale, thin, diminished. When had she stopped fighting? When had she accepted this half-life? The only place Eliza still felt like herself was the garden sanctuary she'd designed at the far corner of the property. Alexander had given her free rein over the space when she'd requested a project to occupy her time. Perhaps it was guilt, or simply indifference, but he'd approved the budget without question. She slipped through the French doors, following the stone path that wound through manicured lawns to her haven. The garden was enclosed by tall hedges, creating a room without a ceiling. Inside, she'd created an architectural wonder in miniature: terraced beds, a small reflecting pool, and a glass pavilion that served as her studio. Here, she still drafted designs, though none would ever be built. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood." Eliza startled at the gardener's voice. "James, please." "It's still Eliza." The elderly man smiled kindly. "Force of habit. The roses are coming along nicely." "They are. Thank you for your help with them." James had been her only consistent human connection these past years. The staff knew the strange dynamics of the household, but maintained professional discretion. "Will you be working in your studio today?" he asked. "Yes, I'm finalizing some sketches." Sketches no one would see. Designs that would never rise from the ground. Her talent, like her heart, locked away in this gilded cage. As she settled at her drafting table, Eliza wondered what Alexander would do if she simply walked away. The prenup was clear. She would get nothing. Her family's business, now thriving under Blackwood management, would likely collapse again without his support. So she stayed, a ghost in her own life, trading her freedom for financial security, her passion for protection. Some days, she convinced herself it was worth it. Today wasn't one of those days. In his office across town, Alexander Blackwood stared at the invitation on his desk. The International Architectural Excellence Awards. His company was being honored for a revolutionary corporate campus, a project that, unknown to the committee, had been partially inspired by sketches he'd found in Eliza's studio during a rare visit to her garden. He'd never told her. It was easier to maintain distance. He picked up his phone. "Claire, please inform Mrs. Blackwood that her presence will be required at the Architectural Awards Gala next Friday. Send the details to her email." He paused, then added, "And have the car ready to take me home early today. I need to speak with her about it personally." Alexander hung up, wondering why, after 3 years of careful avoidance, he suddenly felt the need to break their routine. Perhaps it was time to renegotiate their arrangement. Perhaps it was time for something to change. As he stared out at the city skyline his money had helped shape, Alexander couldn't ignore the emptiness that no amount of success had filled. The emptiness that began long before Eliza entered his life, but somehow seemed more pronounced with her silent presence in his home. "You're the one who set the rules," he reminded himself. Rules that protected him from ever being vulnerable again. Rules that kept him safe. But safe, he was beginning to realize, wasn't the same as alive. Eliza Bennett might live in his house, bear his name. But Alexander Blackwood had never allowed himself to truly see her. 3 years of marriage. And they remained perfect strangers, exactly as he'd planned, until now. The lights of the city glittered below as Alexander's car pulled away from his office tower. For the first time in years, he was leaving work before sunset. For the first time in years, he felt something close to nervousness at the thought of facing his wife. Eliza's garden would be in full bloom now. Perhaps it was time he finally saw what she had created there, what she had created of herself in the space he'd granted her. Perhaps it was time to see Eliza herself. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom cast a warm glow over the crowd of architecture's elite. Eliza stood beside Alexander, her midnight blue gown a stark contrast to his black tuxedo. To anyone watching, they appeared the perfect power couple, the tech mogul and his elegant wife. Their posture comfortable, their occasional smiles convincing. Only Eliza knew how much effort each gesture cost her. 3 years of practice had made her an excellent actress. But tonight was proving especially difficult, being surrounded by her former colleagues, people who still designed and built while she merely dreamed. Reopened wounds she thought had scarred over. "Smile," Alexander murmured, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back, the first time he touched her in months. "The Peterson group is watching." Eliza tilted her head up with practiced ease, a perfect smile gracing her lips. "Of course, darling." The endearment tasted bitter. This charade felt particularly cruel tonight, surrounded by reminders of the career she'd sacrificed. "Alexander Blackwood," a booming voice approached. "And this must be the mysterious Mrs. Blackwood we hear so little about." Eliza turned to see Gabriel Montero, founder of Montero International Developments, one of Alexander's chief rivals. He was shorter than Alexander, but carried himself with unmistakable confidence. "Gabriel," Alexander acknowledged coolly. "This is my wife, Eliza." Gabriel took her hand, holding it a moment longer than necessary. "Eliza Bennett Blackwood, if I'm not mistaken. I remember your thesis project at Cornell, revolutionary use of sustainable materials in high-density housing." Whatever happened to that brilliant young architect? Eliza felt Alexander stiffen beside her. "Life took me in a different direction," she answered diplomatically. "What a waste," Gabriel said, his eyes never leaving hers. "Talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away." Alexander's arm slid possessively around her waist. "My wife's choices are her own." Gabriel smiled knowingly. "Are they? Interesting." He handed Eliza his card. "I'm developing an eco-community in Barcelona. Revolutionary. Sustainable. Exactly the kind of project that would benefit from your perspective. If you ever decide to return to architecture, call me. The position of lead designer is yours. Before Alexander could intervene, the announcer called for guests to take their seats. Gabriel winked at Eliza before disappearing into the crowd. At their table, Alexander's jaw remained tight as the award ceremony began. Eliza tucked the card into her clutch, aware of his gaze tracking the movement. "You're not seriously considering his offer," Alexander said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "I wasn't aware I needed your permission for my career choices," Eliza replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "We have an arrangement." "Yes, we do. I'm your wife in public. In private, I'm nothing to you." "Gabriel is offering me the chance to be something again." Alexander's eyes darkened. "He's using you to get to me. Montero has been trying to undermine my projects for years." "Not everything is about you, Alexander," Eliza whispered fiercely. "He recognized my talent, something you've never acknowledged. Because I've seen your designs," he admitted, shocking her into silence. "The garden pavilion, the sketches in your studio, I've seen them all." Eliza felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. "You've been in my studio. That's private. It's my property. Like me?" The words escaped before she could stop them. For once, Alexander seemed at a loss. Before he could respond, the announcer called out Blackwood Enterprises for the Innovation in Corporate Architecture Award. Alexander stood, straightening his jacket. "We'll discuss this at home." As he walked to the stage, Eliza felt something crack inside her, the careful wall she'd built around her heart. For 3 years, she'd accepted her role as the silent, decorative wife. Tonight, watching another man value what Alexander had dismissed, something rebellious awakened. When Alexander returned with his award, his expression was unreadable. "Ready to go?" "Actually," Eliza said, rising gracefully, "I'd like to network a bit. It's been years since I've been among architects." "Unless that violates our arrangement." She was challenging him, and they both knew it. For a moment, she thought he might refuse. Instead, he nodded tightly. "1 hour, then we leave." As Eliza moved through the crowd, reconnecting with former classmates and mentors, she felt Alexander's eyes following her. For the first time in their marriage, she wasn't performing the role of Mrs. Blackwood. She was reclaiming pieces of Eliza Bennett. When Gabriel approached again, offering her a champagne flute, she accepted it with a genuine smile. "Your husband looks ready to commit murder," Gabriel observed, nodding toward Alexander, who stood rigidly across the room. "He's possessive of things he believes belong to him," Eliza replied. "And do you belong to him?" Eliza took a sip of champagne, considering. "Legally, perhaps. In every way that matters, I'm not sure I belong anywhere anymore." Gabriel's expression softened. "My offer is genuine, Eliza. Your portfolio was extraordinary. Barcelona could use your vision." "Why would you trust someone who hasn't designed professionally in years?" "Because talent doesn't disappear. It just waits for the right opportunity." He clinked his glass against hers. "Think about it. Freedom to create again. A fresh start." Freedom. The word echoed in Eliza's mind as Alexander appeared at her side, his patience clearly exhausted. "Time to go," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. The ride home was charged with tension. For the first time since their wedding day, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was filled with unspoken accusations and questions. As they entered the mansion, Alexander finally broke. "What game are you playing, Eliza?" She turned to face him in the grand foyer, her composure cracking. "Game. I've spent 3 years following your rules, being invisible in my own home. Tonight someone saw me, really saw me, and you have the audacity to accuse me of playing games. Montero is manipulating you. At least he's acknowledging I exist." Her voice echoed off the marble floors. "Do you know what it's like to live with someone who looks through you? Who treats you like a piece of furniture? You've never once asked about my work, my dreams, what I've lost." "Because that wasn't our agreement." Alexander's control slipped, revealing a flash of raw emotion. "You agreed to this arrangement. Clean, simple, uncomplicated. There's nothing simple about living as ghosts under the same roof." Eliza shot back. "You want the perfect wife in public, but can't bear to acknowledge me in private. What are you so afraid of, Alexander? The question hung between them. Too close to truths, neither had dared speak. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered in Alexander's eyes. Then the mask returned. This discussion is pointless. We have a contract. If you're unhappy with the terms, perhaps we should renegotiate. Eliza laughed bitterly. Always the businessman. Fine. Here's my new term. I'm taking the Barcelona position. She saw the shock register on his face before she turned away, heading toward her wing of the house. For the first time in 3 years, she'd broken their carefully constructed politeness. For the first time, she'd demanded to be seen. And for the first time, Alexander Blackwood looked at his wife and felt the terrifying possibility of losing something he'd never allowed himself to value. Alexander stood frozen in the foyer long after Eliza had disappeared, her words echoing in the empty space. He'd built his life around control, controlling his environment, his emotions, his relationships. The carefully constructed walls around his heart had protected him for 15 years. Ever since that rainy night that had destroyed everything he believed about love and trust. He was 17 when his parents' car crashed on the cliffside road to their coastal home. The investigation revealed his father had been drinking heavily, fighting with his mother about his latest affair. Their toxic marriage had finally killed them both, leaving Alexander alone with an empire he wasn't ready to inherit, and a heart he swore would never be vulnerable again. Then came Sophia, his college girlfriend, who'd stayed by his side as he rebuilt his family's company, until the day he discovered she'd been selling company secrets to competitors, using him for insider information and financial gain. When confronted, her cold laughter still haunted him. Did you really think anyone could love the Ice King? I was with you for what you could give me, nothing more. After that, Alexander had approached relationships like business transactions. Clear terms, defined boundaries, no emotional entanglements. When he needed a wife for social standing and stability, Eliza Bennett had seemed perfect, talented, desperate to save her family, and pragmatic enough to accept their arrangement. He hadn't counted on her quiet dignity, her resilience. The way her eyes still sparked with passion when she worked in her garden studio, thinking no one was watching. He hadn't expected to find himself drawn to the woman he'd deliberately kept at arm's length. Alexander moved to his study, pouring himself a whiskey. The Barcelona offer changed everything. Their arrangement had worked because Eliza had nowhere else to go. Now she did. And worse, it was with Gabriel Montero, a man who had made it his mission to undermine Alexander at every turn. Was that all this was? Concern about Montero gaining an advantage. Alexander knew it wasn't. The thought of Eliza leaving, of her talent and quiet strength enriching someone else's life, created a hollow feeling in his chest he couldn't name or wouldn't name. Morning arrived with no solution. Alexander found himself in the kitchen at 6:15 a.m., 15 minutes before Eliza usually appeared. On impulse, he opened the refrigerator, pulling out eggs and vegetables he hadn't cooked in years. But the basics came back to him as he chopped peppers and whisked eggs. When Eliza entered, she stopped short at the sight of him at the stove, flour dusting his normally immaculate shirt. "What are you doing?" she asked, confusion evident. Alexander felt uncharacteristically self-conscious. "Making breakfast. Omelets." He gestured awkwardly to the table, already set for two. "I thought we could talk." Eliza approached cautiously, as if expecting a trap. "About?" "The West Side Development Project." He slid an omelet onto a plate, presenting it with all the confidence of a child, showing a parent a mediocre art project. "I want you to lead the design team." Eliza stared at him, then at the plate. "Is this your way of competing with Montero's offer?" "It's my way of acknowledging your talent." Alexander sat across from her, meeting her eyes directly. "I've been unfair to you, Eliza. Not just recently, but from the beginning." She picked up her fork, still suspicious. "Why now?" Alexander considered lying, crafting some business-oriented explanation. Instead, he found himself speaking a truth he'd barely admitted to himself. "Because I've spent 3 years pretending not to see you. And last night, watching another man value what I've taken for granted, I realized how much I've lost through my own fear." "Fear?" Eliza's fork paused halfway to her mouth. What could the great Alexander Blackwood possibly fear? vulnerability. The admission cost him, but he continued. My parents' marriage was a battlefield. My first relationship after their death was a painful lesson in trust. I built walls to protect myself and called it strength. Eliza set down her fork. So our arrangement was never about business efficiency. It was about keeping me at a safe distance. Yes, the single word hung between them. Why didn't you tell me this 3 years ago? Would it have changed your decision? Eliza considered this. No. My family needed the security. But it might have changed how I lived within those constraints. She looked at him with new understanding. You've never touched me. Not even on our wedding day. I thought you found me repulsive. Alexander's eyes widened. No, God no, Eliza. I found you too tempting. Touch leads to connection. Connection leads to vulnerability. And vulnerability leads to pain. She finished softly. So instead, we've lived like ghosts, haunting the same space, but never truly present. I'd like to change that. Alexander pushed a folder across the table. This is the West Side Project. 50 acres of abandoned industrial space being transformed into a mixed-use community. Sustainable housing, green spaces, community facilities. Your thesis project made real on a larger scale. Eliza opened the folder, her fingers tracing the preliminary sketches. These incorporate elements from my garden designs. I noticed your work combines beauty with functionality in a way our current team hasn't achieved. He hesitated. It's yours if you want it, regardless of what you decide about Barcelona. And our arrangement? Eliza asked quietly. Does that change too? Alexander met her gaze. I think it already has. The breakfast ended without clear resolution, but something had shifted. For the first time, they'd spoken as equals, as people with histories and wounds and desires. For the first time, Alexander had allowed Eliza to see beyond his carefully constructed facade. As she left for her garden sanctuary, he watched her go with new eyes. 3 years of marriage. And only now was he beginning to see his wife, not as an acquisition or an arrangement, but as a woman of extraordinary strength and talent. A woman he might already be losing. The formal offer from Montero International arrived by courier 3 days later. Eliza sat in her garden pavilion, the thick envelope in her hands containing everything she'd once dreamed of: creative control, recognition, purpose, freedom. Yet she found herself hesitating. Alexander's unexpected breakfast gesture had cracked something open between them. The following days had brought small changes. Alexander arriving home earlier, asking about her day, lingering in conversations that once would have been cut short. Nothing dramatic. But each interaction felt like stepping onto untested ice, thrilling and dangerous. She opened the envelope, scanning the details. The position was even more impressive than Gabriel had suggested. Lead architect on an eco-community that would house 5,000 residents, with sustainability at its core. A 3-year contract with an option to renew. A salary that would make her financially independent. Barcelona. An ocean away from the mansion that had been her beautiful prison. An ocean away from Alexander. Her phone rang. Alexander's assistant, Mrs. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood asked me to inform you of an urgent situation. He's requesting you come to the office immediately. What's happened? He didn't specify, ma'am. The car is already on its way. 40 minutes later, Eliza was escorted into Alexander's office. Through the glass walls, she could see a boardroom filled with agitated executives. Alexander stood at his desk, his expression grimmer than she'd ever seen it. What's going on? She asked. The Chen merger is collapsing. They're claiming our West Side development plans violate environmental regulations and are backing out of the deal. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of distress. Without their backing, we lose the project and 20% of our company value. Eliza frowned. How could the plans violate regulations? Your team is meticulous. They are. This feels like sabotage. Alexander's jaw tightened. Montero has been circling this deal for months. The implication was clear. You think Gabriel used his offer to me to gain information about Blackwood projects? The timing is suspicious. He approaches you at the gala. Days later, our biggest project faces environmental challenges. His specialty. Eliza felt cold anger rising. I haven't shared anything with him. I haven't even accepted the position. Alexander's eyes snapped to hers. You haven't? No. But thank you for immediately assuming I'd betray you. She turned to leave, then stopped. Let me see the plans they're objecting to. Alexander hesitated, then pulled up the files on his tablet. Eliza studied them intently, her architect's eye catching details others might miss. There, she pointed. The water reclamation system. It's innovative, but could be interpreted as interfering with natural groundwater flow. It's not actually harmful, but the wording in the proposal is ambiguous enough that someone could challenge it. Alexander stared at her, then at the plans. How did you catch that so quickly? It's similar to a system I designed in graduate school. I had to defend it against the same objection. She took the tablet, making quick annotations. You need to emphasize these aspects and clarify these specifications. The system actually enhances groundwater quality. But that's not clear in your documentation. For several minutes, she worked silently, restructuring the environmental impact statement. When she finished, she handed the tablet back. This should address their concerns, assuming they're legitimate, and not just a delaying tactic. Alexander reviewed her work, his expression shifting from concern to admiration. This is exceptional, Eliza. I was an architect before I was your wife, Alexander. I haven't forgotten how to do this. She moved toward the door. Good luck with your meeting. Stay. The word stopped her. Help me present this to the Chen representatives. Show them what you showed me. You want me in your boardroom. As what? As my wife, as a brilliant architect, as my partner. His voice softened on the last word. Please, Eliza, I need you. 4 simple words she'd never expected to hear from him. 4 words that changed everything. 2 hours later, the Chen representatives left satisfied, the merger back on track. Alexander's executive team filed out, several nodding respectfully to Eliza as they passed. She remained seated at the boardroom table, processing what had just happened. Alexander closed the door behind the last executive, leaving them alone. You were magnificent. I was just doing my job, the job I was trained for. A job I prevented you from doing for 3 years. He sat beside her, closer than their usual careful distance. I've been a fool, Eliza. Yes, she agreed simply. You have. A surprised laugh escaped him. No argument there. His expression grew serious. Take the West Side project, not as a counter to Montero's offer, but because it should have been yours from the beginning. Eliza studied him. And if I want Barcelona instead? Pain flashed across his face, quickly masked. Then I won't stop you. You deserve freedom, Eliza. Even if it's freedom from me. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. For the first time, Alexander wasn't negotiating or controlling. He was surrendering. I need time to think, she said finally. About Barcelona, about West Side, about us, if there even is an us to consider. Alexander nodded. Take all the time you need. As her car pulled away from the Blackwood Tower, Eliza clutched both offers, Barcelona and West Side, feeling the weight of her choice. A new beginning abroad, or a second chance at home, freedom or reconciliation. For the first time in 3 years, the choice was truly hers. That evening, Alexander didn't return home at his usual time. Eliza found herself checking the clock repeatedly, an unfamiliar anxiety building as hours passed with no word. At 11, she heard his car in the driveway. Instead of retreating to her wing as she normally would, she waited in the living room. Alexander entered looking exhausted, his tie loosened, jacket discarded. He stopped short seeing her. You're still up. I wanted to thank you for today, for trusting me in that meeting. You saved the project, possibly the company. He moved to the bar, pouring a whiskey. Can I get you something? No, thank you. Eliza watched him, noting the tension in his shoulders. Is everything all right? Alexander took a long sip before answering. The board questioned my decision to involve you. They suggested it was inappropriate to bring my wife into company matters. I see. I told them if they had a problem with the most qualified architect in the city leading our most important project, they were welcome to resign. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. 3 of them threatened to. I reminded them the Chen representatives specifically praised your input. Eliza felt a warmth spreading through her chest. You defended me. I should have done it years ago. He set down his glass. You received Montero's formal offer today. It wasn't a question. Yes. Have you decided? Eliza shook her head. It's not a simple choice. Because of your family's company, partly. She met his gaze directly. And partly because of what's changing between us. Alexander took a step toward her, then stopped, as if hitting an invisible barrier, the boundary they'd maintained for 3 years. What if, he began, then faltered. What if I tore up our contract? What if we started over? As what? As two people getting to know each other. No arrangements, no conditions. His voice dropped. Just Alexander and Eliza. The proposition hung between them, fragile and terrifying. Eliza rose from her seat, approaching him slowly. That would mean letting go of control, taking a risk. Are you capable of that, Alexander? I don't know, he admitted, but I want to try. She stood before him now, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. Why? Because I've spent 3 years pretending not to want you, and I can't do it anymore. The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. Because when Montero offered you Barcelona, I realized I might lose you before I ever really had you. Eliza's heart pounded. You've never touched me, not once in 3 years. I was afraid, he whispered, afraid that if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop. The confession hung in the air between them. Slowly, deliberately, Eliza raised her hand and placed it against his cheek. Their first real contact since a coldly formal handshake on their wedding day. Alexander closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starved. When he opened them again, the vulnerability there took her breath away. I should have done this years ago, she murmured, echoing his earlier words. His hand came up to cover hers, warm and strong. We've wasted so much time. Then let's not waste any more. The first brush of his lips against hers was hesitant, questioning. The second was not. 3 years of distance collapsed in an instant as Alexander pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair, the other at her waist. Eliza responded with equal fervor, pouring 3 years of loneliness and longing into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Not because of our arrangement. Not for your family. Stay for this. For us. Eliza pulled back slightly, meeting his gaze. I can't answer that tonight. This changes everything, but it doesn't erase the past 3 years. I know. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gesture achingly tender. I'm asking for a chance to make it right. I need time, Alexander, to think clearly, to be sure. He nodded, reluctantly releasing her. Whatever you decide, the West Side project is yours if you want it. No strings attached. As Eliza walked toward her wing of the house, she paused at the stairs. Come to my garden tomorrow. See what I've built there. If we're going to start over, you should know who I really am. Alexander's smile, genuine hopeful, was answer enough. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Eliza didn't cry herself to sleep. And for the first time, if she had, Alexander might have done something about it. The morning dawned clear and bright. A perfect June day. Eliza waited in her garden sanctuary, nervous in a way she hadn't been since her thesis defense. Today felt equally momentous. She was presenting not just her work, but herself, her soul. Alexander appeared at the garden entrance precisely at the time they'd agreed upon. He looked different somehow, less the imposing CEO and more simply a man, dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater. Welcome to my garden, Eliza said, suddenly shy. Alexander stepped through the entrance, and she watched his expression change as he took in the space properly for the first time. His previous glimpses had been brief, purposeful invasions. Now he was seeing it as she'd intended, as a complete experience. The garden unfolded in a series of connected outdoor rooms, each with its own character, but flowing naturally into the next. Modern architectural elements, steel arches, glass panels, concrete seating, merged seamlessly with natural materials and lush plantings. Water features created both sound and movement, while cleverly placed mirrors expanded the space visually. It's extraordinary, Alexander breathed, turning slowly to take it all in. I knew you were talented, but this, he gestured to the harmonious whole. This is art. Eliza felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. This is who I am, what I can create when given freedom. She led him through each space, explaining her design choices, the challenges she'd overcome. the vision behind each element. Alexander listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that revealed his genuine interest. At the center of the garden stood her glass pavilion, her studio, her sanctuary. She hesitated before the door. "This is where I've spent most of the last 3 years," she explained. "It's very personal." "May I?" Alexander asked, hand on the door handle. Eliza nodded, feeling strangely vulnerable as he stepped inside. The studio walls were covered with designs, some for the garden, others for buildings that existed only in her imagination. Models sat on every surface. Sketches filled folders stacked neatly on shelves. Alexander moved slowly around the space, examining each drawing with care. "These should exist in the world," he said finally, turning to her. "Not just on paper. Some of them will now, through the West Side Project. Is that what you want?" His question was gentle, probing. Eliza considered carefully before answering. "I want to create, to build, to see my designs become real spaces where people live and work and find joy." She met his gaze. "Barcelona offers that. So does West Side. The question is which path feels right. And us?" Alexander asked quietly. "Where do we fit in those paths?" "That's what I'm still figuring out." She stepped closer to him. "Last night changed things. But one kiss, however wonderful, doesn't erase 3 years of distance. What would?" His voice was low intent. "Tell me what you need, Eliza. Whatever it is, I'll do it." The raw sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. "I need honesty, vulnerability. I need to know this isn't just fear of losing me to a competitor." Alexander took her hands in his, a gesture that would have been unthinkable days ago. "When I saw Montero looking at you, not as my wife but as a brilliant architect, I realized I'd been seeing your talent every day and saying nothing. Appreciating your beauty every morning across the breakfast table and pretending indifference." His grip tightened. "It wasn't about Montero. It was about watching someone else value openly what I'd valued silently for years." "Why silently?" Eliza pressed. "Why maintain the facade even in private?" "Because admitting how much I admired you, how much I wanted you, meant admitting our arrangement wasn't working. That I'd failed at the one relationship I thought I could control." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "It meant facing feelings I'd spent 15 years running from. And now I'm terrified," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Terrified of losing you. More terrified of having you and failing you. But for the first time, I'm more afraid of regret than of risk." Eliza studied his face, seeing the cost of this confession in the tension around his eyes. The powerful Alexander Blackwood, laying himself bare before her. "I need one more day," she said finally. "One day to make this decision with a clear head. Can you give me that?" Though disappointment flashed across his features, he nodded. "Of course." As he turned to leave, Eliza called after him. "Alexander, thank you for seeing my garden, for really seeing it. Thank you for showing me." He paused at the entrance. "Whatever you decide, Eliza, know that I'm proud of you. Your talent is extraordinary. You deserve to be recognized for it, whether here or in Barcelona." As he walked away, Eliza realized it was the first compliment he'd given her in 3 years of marriage, and the first time she truly believed he saw her for herself, not as an accessory to his life. The choice before her had never been more difficult or more important. The next evening, Alexander waited in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey on the desk before him. Eliza had asked for one day to decide, and he'd honored that request, though every hour had felt like torture. Now, hearing her footsteps approaching, he rose, heart hammering against his ribs. She entered without knocking, her expression unreadable. In her hands, she held 2 envelopes, one bearing the Montero International logo, the other the Blackwood Enterprises insignia. "I've made my decision," she said simply. Alexander nodded, unable to trust his voice. He watched as she placed both envelopes on his desk, then reached into her pocket and withdrew a third document, their marriage contract, the prenuptial agreement that had defined their relationship for 3 years. His mouth went dry. "Eliza, let me finish." Her voice was steady, determined. 3 years ago, we made an arrangement based on convenience and necessity. You needed a wife for appearances. I needed security for my family. We've both honored those terms." She picked up the contract. "But this document doesn't account for change. for growth, for the possibility that two people might begin as strangers and become. She paused, searching for the right word. More. With deliberate movements, she tore the contract in half, then in quarters. Alexander watched, transfixed, as the pieces fell to the desk. "I'm not accepting either offer," she said, gesturing to the envelopes. "Not as they stand." Alexander felt his heart sink. "You're leaving?" "No." Eliza stepped around the desk until she stood directly before him. "I'm proposing a new arrangement, a partnership, personal and professional." Hope surged through him. "What kind of partnership?" "I want to establish Bennett Blackwood Design as a division within your company. I'll lead the West Side project. But I want autonomy to pursue other projects as well, including collaboration with Montero International on the Barcelona development as a consulting architect." Alexander blinked, processing her words. "You want to work with both companies?" "I want to build bridges instead of walls. Montero has innovative ideas about sustainability that could benefit Westside. Your company has resources and reach that could elevate the Barcelona project." Her eyes sparkled with passion. "And I want to be the connection between them. That's ambitious." Alexander couldn't help but admire her vision. "As for us," Eliza continued, her voice softening, "I want a real marriage, not a business arrangement. Not a performance for others. A partnership between equals who choose each other every day." She took his hands, mirroring his gesture from the day before. "I choose you, Alexander. Not out of obligation or necessity, but because I see the man behind the walls you've built. I see your strength, your loyalty, your capacity for change. And I want to build something with you that's stronger and more beautiful than anything we could create alone." Alexander felt something break open inside him, not painfully, but like a dam releasing, allowing emotions to flow freely for the first time in years. "I don't deserve this second chance." "Probably not," Eliza agreed with a small smile, "but I'm offering it anyway." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. "I choose you too, Eliza. I should have chosen you every day for the past 3 years. I promise to make up for lost time. Starting now," she whispered against his chest. Alexander pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Starting now." This time when they kissed, it wasn't fueled by 3 years of repressed longing. It was gentler, a promise rather than a release. The kiss of two people with time stretching before them, no longer afraid of what that time might bring. Later, as moonlight filtered through the windows of what was now their shared bedroom, Alexander traced patterns on Eliza's bare shoulder. "Tell me about your vision for Bennett Blackwood Design." Eliza propped herself up on one elbow, her eyes alight with ideas. As she outlined her plans, Alexander watched her with wonder, marveling at the extraordinary woman he'd kept at a distance for so long. "What?" she asked, noticing his expression. "I'm just thinking about how much I almost lost through fear." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you for being braver than I was. We're both learning," Eliza said softly. "That's what partnership is." 6 months later, the groundbreaking ceremony for the West Side development drew media from across the country. Alexander stood proudly beside Eliza as she presented her revolutionary design to the assembled crowd. Her family watched from the front row, her father's eyes shining with pride. In the audience sat Gabriel Montero, who had reluctantly agreed to the collaborative arrangement Eliza had proposed. The Barcelona project was now moving forward, with Bennett Blackwood Design as consulting architects, bringing their sustainable innovations to both developments. "And now," Eliza concluded her presentation, "I'd like to invite my husband and partner, Alexander Blackwood, to join me in turning the first soil on what will become not just buildings, but a community." As they stood together, silver shovels poised over the earth, Alexander whispered, "I'm so proud of you." Eliza smiled up at him. "We did this together." They pushed their shovels into the ground simultaneously, symbolically beginning construction on the project that had brought them together, truly together at last. That evening, they celebrated in Eliza's garden, now their garden. The space that had once been her sanctuary had become the heart of their home, where they often worked side by side, sharing ideas and dreams. Alexander wrapped his arms around her as they stood by the reflecting pool. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Montero hadn't approached you that night? Sometimes, Eliza admitted. But I think we would have found our way eventually. Some walls are meant to fall. I'm glad mine did. Alexander pressed a kiss to her temple. Though I wish it hadn't taken 3 years. Those years weren't wasted, Eliza said thoughtfully. I built this garden. I found my strength. You built your company. We both learned what matters. You matter, Alexander said simply. Us, together, we matter. As twilight deepened around them, they remained in each other's arms, no longer separated by fear or contracts or rules. The garden that had once been Eliza's escape had become their sanctuary, a place where two people who had begun as strangers had learned to see each other clearly at last. For Alexander Blackwood, who had spent a lifetime building walls, the greatest achievement wasn't his business empire or his fortune. It was learning that love meant letting go of fear and finding in that surrender everything he'd never dared to want.